Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Jones, and I'm the Communications Director here at TrueCar. It is my honor, it is my privilege to welcome you to TrueTalks, discussions about diversity. Now, whether you're watching this broadcast live with us or you're checking out the replay, a sincere thank you for carving out the time to join us. Now, here at TrueCar, we kicked off these discussions early last year, and these roundtable panel conversations, well, they allow us to really examine the unique experiences, the unique opportunities, and the unique challenges experienced by diverse populations within automotive. And in this particular session, we're going to be talking about the Black experience in the car business. We're going to be talking about representation, the economic benefits of DEI, the importance of mentorship and allyship. We're talking all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to make the most of the time that you spend with us. But before we jump in, and I can't tell you how excited I am to jump in, I want to give a sincere special shout out to the folks at TrueCar for allowing a safe space for us to have these conversations. And more so, not just allowing the space, but for encouraging it. So thank you. Now, as I said, this is going to be a really great conversation, and we've pulled together an all-star panel of some of the industry's brightest minds to really make this conversation pop. So without any further ado, I'd like to get started and bring on our panelists one at a time, and I'm going to start with Mr. Perry Watson IV. Hey, Perry, how are you, sir?
How you doing, Matt?
I am so glad to hear you. I'm so glad to see you. For those who are not familiar, Perry is a program management director at Solera, and he is the president of NAMAD's Next Gen. Next up, we have Mr. Jim Fitzpatrick. Jim Fitzpatrick is the founder and CEO of CBT Automotive News, and he is a longtime champion of diversity and inclusion within automotive. Jim, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Next up, we have Mr. Marc Bland, and Marc is IHS Markit's Chief Diversity Officer, and he is also the co-founder of the Diversity Volume Leadership Awards. Marc, thank you for your time.
Hey, Matt, good to see you. Jim, Perry, glad to be here, man.
Next up, we have Erikka Tiffany Wells, and she is one of automotive's fastest rising stars. She's a sales manager at VW of Marion, and she is also the co-founder of WOCAN, Women of Color Automotive Network. Erikka, thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, I'm honored.
And the anchor of our conversation, Mr. Damon Lester. He is the owner of Nissan of Bowie, and he is the president of NAMAD, National Association for Minority Automobile Dealers. Damon, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me. Good seeing everybody.
Now, for the folks viewing, I told you we got an all-star roster of who's who and what's what. All right, now I'm going to get started with this conversation. And in this panel conversation, for everybody who's here, what I'm going to normally do is I'm going to try to reach out to a person with a question. That means that everybody else can answer it, but don't feel that you don't have to. But everybody please feel free to chime in. And this first question I want to direct towards. Well, you know what? Actually, let's take a step back. I think all of us on the call know each other, but how about we introduce ourselves for the folks on the call who are not familiar with the folks on the panel? So, Perry, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, my name is Perry Watson IV. As Matt mentioned, I'm the program management director of minority and women retail programs for Solera, and we're very, very happy to be here today. We have an initiative through our company called the Apex Initiative. Software for Good. We're a software company. And so we're very, very happy to be a part of this conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I personally have been in the automotive industry for 20 years on the dealer side. I finished my career as a general manager and part owner of Lexus of Mishawaka. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Perry. And Mr. Fitzpatrick, how about you?
I'm Jim Fitzpatrick, and I am co-founder of CBT Automotive Network out of Atlanta. And this is, if I'm still in the auto industry, because I was a former dealer principal, but I started in the retail auto industry in 1980. So this is my 42nd year. I can't believe I'm saying that, but 42 years in retail automotive, loving every minute of it. I'm on the media side now, but so glad to be here and be, with all of you to be talking about this very, very important issue of diversity.
Thank you, Jim. Damon, let's go with you.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Damon Lester. I'm president of the National Association of Minority Auto Dealers and also dealer principal of Nissan and Bowie. I've been in the industry for 20 years.
Thank you, Damon. Erikka?
Erikka Tiffany Wells. I'm a sales manager at Volkswagen of Marion. I'm also the vice president and co-founder of Women of Color Automotive Network. Been in the car business for going on 18 years, started out in service, have done sales, finance, and just looking forward to the next step.
Right on, Erikka, and thank you. And Mr. Bland?
Hey, Marc Bland. I proudly serve my company, IHS Markit, and the entire automotive industry, including the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, the dealers, the suppliers, as well as auto-focused media. And my goal, unlike most chief diversity officers, is outside in. I look to help you figure out how you can increase your bottom line by better serving the future majority, which is African Americans, Asian Hispanics, women, the LGBT population, and military families. So thanks for having me, Matt and company.
Oh, fantastic. It's my pleasure. And thank you guys all sincerely for making the time because this is going to be a fantastic panel. I'm going to direct this first conversation over to you, Damon. Where are we in terms of diversity in automotive, particularly as it relates to ownership and even more particularly as it relates to Black people?
Okay, so first, it's a good question. First, Black History Month. So we'll tee off with the African American numbers. So 18,000 new car dealerships, of which there are about 266 African American owned new car dealers, and my dealership is actually 266, which is interesting, right? And so globally, we represent 6% of the minority, 6% of the dealer body, and over 30% of the consumers are minority, which my brother Marc will probably touch on.
So Damon, before we go away from that, you said 266. Does that mean that there's 266 Black owners?
No, those are dealerships or rooftops. So if you average dealer has about 2 stores, so you can break it in half. There's probably about 100, 125 individual owners.
Okay, so for those who are jumping in late, there's about 18,000 stores in the country. Probably about 150 of them or so are owned by Black owners. And I'm going to ask you one more question to help set the stage on that. From your estimation, how many of those Black owners identify as female?
Oh man, that's probably about a handful, a little over a handful, about 6 or 7.
About 6 or 7.
Yeah, but that's dealerships, but individuals, looking at 5.
5.
Yeah.
18,000 stores, 150 or so Black owners, about 5 of them are women. And so for the people who are, joining this call who are not familiar with these conversations, this is one of the reasons why we want to have that. The first time that you hear those numbers, they may be striking, they may be surprising. And the more people who understand the scope of what we're talking about, probably the more effective these conversations are going to be. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to chime in?
I would, Matt. I just want to add a little bit more color to my brother Damon's initial comments, leading comments. So he said 266 rooftops for African Americans out of the 18,000 total dealers. That's only 1.5%. That's 1.5% of all dealers. That's I'm shaking my head, and you can read between the lines when you compare it to what African Americans contribute to the new vehicle bottom line, which is almost 1 out of 10 new vehicles sold. African Americans purchase. They represent 9% of all new vehicle sales right now, going into 2022. And women, I'll just give you an overarch because we don't want to break it down into the microcosms. 42% of all new vehicles sold or purchased in the United States are purchased by women, just all women. So again, you start looking at that, and that we've got a long way to go. So this conversation is very timely and much needed.
I'll chime in on that. This is why we started WOCAN. It's for automotive female professionals in the industry, myself, Carrie Wise, Amanda Gordon, and Patrice Banks. We realized how disproportionate it was to see faces like ours in the industry. You don't see the Black general managers. You're not seeing the Black dealer principals, and you definitely aren't seeing these women. And the question was why, and what can we do to change it? Because we can complain about it all day, but until we're able to do something to create that change, which is why we started our nonprofit. We're all about educating and empowering women, doing scholarships. TrueCar is a big sponsor of us. And it is important to let women out there know, especially minority women, that you can have the automotive industry, especially in a time right now where people are thinking about changing courses and thinking about getting into new industries, while the change of the employment opportunities, or people are opening up their mind, they're looking for work from home opportunities. Look, they're looking for something different, and that the automotive space is a space for them. But if they don't see it, then how can they believe that that's something that they could do?
100%, could not agree more. Perry,
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, well, Matt, I would just say the last number I saw was that African Americans spend 50 billion, I believe it is, a year in new vehicle purchases, just new vehicle purchases. And so you think back historically, right? Tying it back into Black History Month, whether it was Garrett Morgan inventing the traffic light, or Ed Davis, or the first African American dealers, we're still very significant to this industry today. And so it's very important to understand from a historical context to now. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a ton that's changed in terms of our representation in the industry. And so this is a very relevant conversation for us to have.
And Perry, when you talk about historical, I'm going to jump back to Damon and ask this question, because I think I may have heard you answer this once before, but I'd love for you to answer it again for this panel. Why is there so little Black ownership in this industry?
Oh, and this kind of, today is the 224-22, right? And so we weren't allowed to become dealers until 1967. A little over 50 plus years, right? So when you put that into perspective, the industry as a whole is over 100 years old. So the people who don't look like us had over 50 plus year head start, right? We weren't allowed to become owners. We were only allowed to sell cars in our neighborhoods through trunks, pre civil rights movement. And so the why is lack of access, and the whole environment from a segregation standpoint prevented us to have those opportunities that others have had historically. And so our generation, or our minority dealer body, particularly African American dealer body, are majority of first generation dealers. Right. And I've said this a couple of times. If you put it into perspective of a 30-year mortgage, there's a finite number of minority dealers in the business today that have 30 years and have been 30 years in business.
That's right. Matt, I would add to that these numbers that we continue to talk about and that we've known about now for some time are completely unacceptable. To Tiffany's point, it's time to take action. We've got to hold people within the industry that can affect change accountable. And that, I believe, starts with the OEMs. They're selling these cars to these Black consumers, nationwide, and to these minorities and to females, the 48% or 42% that buy cars. And I would tell you, because I'm married, as most married guys would tell you, that they are really selling them to almost 95% of the market, because I'm not driving home a new car unless my wife approves the purchase, right? I'm the first to admit that. So, I say that all of these things that we're talking about needs time for action, and the one thing that we realized through the BLM movement is that when you get together, and I say you because I mean the Black community get together, you can make huge impacts on companies that wake up and say, whoa, where are we falling short here? And I say that we hold the OEMs accountable to say, this is what we demand in the industry in terms of the necessary numbers with Black dealers. And I think they've gotten off on a little bit of a free ride. A lot of them have made huge strides, and I commend them for that. Nissan is one of them. I know, Damon, you're a Nissan dealer. They've done a great job, and they're doing a better job each day. But then there's been a lot of a lot of OEMs out there that haven't paid that much attention or just paid lip service to it. We all know that if an OEM wants something done, man, they can get it done, whether it be a factory, a battery factory, a marketing campaign, running $10 million Super Bowl ads. They can do it all. They can do this too, but we just got to hold them accountable.
So true.
So I want to add something to that, Matt. I think that's in parallel, this delta that Damon has brought up and we've all chimed in on, is in parallel to another, I'll call it new frontier, new opportunity for the auto industry. When you look at the role of CEO, and again, I'm blessed to be an African American that has a C-level title, but I'm not CEO, I'm CDO. And there's multiple of us that are senior vice presidents, executive VPs. But there's this barrier when you think about the auto industry and its history. There's been too many Caucasian and Asian CEOs of OEMs to mention, right? And then we broke through with Jose Munoz being the first Hispanic CEO at Nissan, followed by another Hispanic CEO at Nissan, which was Jose Valls. And then coming out of Nissan was Fred Diaz. He was a senior vice president, became CEO of Mitsubishi for a period. So there's been 3 Hispanic CEOs, too many Asian and Caucasians. The challenge I put out, Damon's heard me say this multiple times, which OEM is going to be bold enough and brave enough to give an African-American male or female the title of CEO of an OEM, not CEO of a distributor, not of a dealer group, not of some kind of supplier group, of the OEM. So I think when these two things change, because I'll end on this for this topic, when you look at Munoz came over at Nissan and started a movement, right? He was the first one to put more marketing focus on the future majority, African American and Hispanics, than Caucasians. He was the first one. He's replicating that same methodology over at Hyundai. We know what kind of success Hyundai and Genesis are having. I think you're going to see this start to open up once an OEM is bold enough to say, hey, we're beyond the senior VP, the executive, and let an African American become CEO. Then I think they're going to start, the plate is going to shift and things are going to start to align. Just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Very good point.
And I appreciate that because, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at DEI. I think the people on this call and the people who are tuning in, I think that they're intrinsically vested in the idea of diversity of person and diversity of thought. But it's not a given that everybody in automotive feels that way. But it is a given, in my opinion, my humble opinion, that everybody in automotive cares about the economics. So let's talk about what are the economic benefits of DEI. And I think, Mark, you kind of touched on it, but why should the broader industry care? Let's just talk about the folks who just don't feel it in their heart and soul, but the folks who are just really money driven. What have we seen and what could we reference as economic benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I'll leave this question open for anybody who wants to jump in, but I think it's going to be you, Mark.
I'll start and just lay down a foundation that everybody else can jump on it and add in based on expertise. It's not Mark Bland. It's not my brother Damon Lester. Jim Fitzpatrick, Perry Watson IV, Erikka, Tiffany Wells, or even you, Matt. It's the U.S. Census that's laid out the benchmark for us and said 2045 is the year that the 3 minority populations, African American being one, of which Hispanic and Asian, will become the majority population, and thus we can assume the majority new vehicle buyer in the United States. So just based on that pathway that's been laid out for us, again, by somebody as reputable as the U.S. Census, again, not Mark Glenn in my big mouth, but the U.S. Census, I think that's where we need to start with and say, hey, and then adding this cool little buzzword that we're talking about now, sustainability. So I've created a new buzzword called, if you want to be consumer sustainable, and if your business wants to be viable today, which again, right now is still Caucasian dominant, but if you want to be dominant today and in the future, then you need to start focusing on this future majority, which African Americans are a big part of. The last comment I'll add to that is when you start thinking about, hey, Hispanics have the largest population and they have the largest slice of the cake when it comes to new vehicle buying. But when you start talking about influence, the analogy I give is, hey, 25 years ago, put your money on the Rolling Stones and you're going to sell, line your brand with the Rolling Stones or some other rock and roll group, you're going to sell a bunch of vehicles just because of the alliance. Now, today, you start thinking about what just happened at the Super Bowl halftime show.
Right.
Those folks and how they have influence and how I have, not just blacks or people from urban community, but Caucasians, Hispanics were like, whoa, Jay-Z and Dr. Dre and Mary J. Blige. So you start to look at that, and I think that's where we're going as far as not just the numbers, but the influence as well.
Right.
And Matt, there's to piggyback what Mark says, there's a wealth gap. There's a wealth gap. There's a gap in leadership, right? But there, in order to make the Black Lives Matter movement really make an effort, it wasn't just us talking about our issue, right? We saw when we would talk about our issue, it really didn't. It was just, oh, we're supposed to talk about that because we're Black or we're African American. It didn't really jump until we saw non-minorities. A lot of white people got into the movement because they saw that it was unfair.
Mm-hmm.
They realized that there was something that just wasn't right, and they helped push that over the top. And so, in order for this really to work at the C-suite level, at the dealership level, we know the dollars are being spent, but it has to be other people outside of us that look more like Jim than us to help push that abroad. And because if it wasn't for people like Jim, last 2 years, Jim, we've all been on your show, and you were the only one to talk about the issue on your show. And so that helped us carry that message forward, because if it wasn't for people like Jim, there are a lot of publications that kind of, they shed a lot of things under the rug and didn't want to talk about that. It was too controversial, or it was their issue. Right.
And I will tell you, Damon, and I thank you for coming on the show and talking about this, because I am one of those, white folks that wants to see this change. And if we can use CBT as a platform to help that happen, we're more than happy to do it, because it's the right thing to do. And it's interesting. I've received some unfavorable emails and text messages from those in the industry. We don't have to name them, that said, what are you doing? The industry's going along great. There are some successful Black dealers, and why are you bringing this up right now? And that's the way that it has been for 100 years, or at least since the 60s, since Blacks could even, to your point, could even become a dealer. And that's just shameful. I've been in the industry, as I just said, 42 years, and I'm ashamed about that part of the industry. So now that I've got kind of a bullhorn, if you will, or a platform to talk about it, bring it up, and affect change, we're doing it. We don't, it's interesting though, to your point earlier, that you've got so much buying power out there that we've heard from sponsors to our show, Cox Automotive and so many others, and TrueCar, in fact, that have said, man, keep going, keep doing these shows. This is what we need to talk about. And to Tiffany's point, now we've got to take action. In terms of the Super Bowl, a halftime show, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting, though, a number of those people jumped in a Range Rover and went back to their hotels or their homes. Ask Range Rover how many Black dealers they have today.
Yeah.
And if the answer is still zero, that's a major problem, because I would tell those people to jump in an Escalade then, or jump in a Mercedes Benz, or jump in any of those OEMs that you feel are doing a good job and moving the football down the field, no pun intended. But these are the kinds of things that we can change, and that the Black community can have a huge impact on. If they were to jump in, another type of car and say, I'm not driving a Range Rover until we see a Black Range Rover dealer in the U.S., how fast do you think Range Rover would appoint a Black dealer? Probably by the end of the Super Bowl halftime show.
No doubt.
And the thing that I would add too, that Jim mentioned, is the sincerity, right? I remember back in the day, we were very brand loyal. My grandfather, my uncle, they only bought certain vehicles. And I believe that a lot of the minority communities, and especially the Black community, are looking for relationships. There are always going to be new shiny objects, right? There are always going to be new great vehicles. But who's going to have a sincere relationship with the community? And that is going to be the game changer, because you cannot duplicate that on a manufacturing line. We know if you're with us or not. And I think that when that happens, you will see more African-American dealers. You will see, a relationship that people will say, okay, I'm buying that vehicle because it's a nice vehicle, right? But it's also about the relationship.
But I'm going to add to that and share that Damon and I did a study, it's going on, Damon, 6-7 years now, where the question we heard from, again, Perry, Watson, Ford, 3. Now Damon's a minor dealer, but some of their predecessors, and they know who they are, not name drop, that on the golf course, what they would say is, hey, when I'm trying to get a new deal, a new open point, a new retailer location, that the question always came from the OEM, if I give you this point, African-American, Hispanic, or Asian operator, or Native American operator, how can you guarantee me, or can you guarantee me you're going to sell more vehicles into your given population? David and I put together a study where we put his peanut butter, which is his minority dealer list, and our chocolate, which is the best dealer information in the industry, together, and created the only minority dealer data store. And when we analyzed that data store, what we found, and we proved our hypothesis, that African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians actually over-index. They sell more of their inventory, their given inventory, to their corresponding ethnic consumer group than their Caucasian peers. I.e., so I'll just top of my head, African Americans represent 8% of new vehicle sales, 9% new vehicle sales. African American dealers sell about 24% of their inventory to other blacks. Yep. 1 out of 4 cars or trucks or CUVs in their lot are picked up by blacks. Hispanics are like 33%, I think like 33%, 1 out of 3 trucks, cars, or whatever on a Hispanic dealer's lot gets sold and purchased by another Hispanic. And Asians the same way. So I think it comes back to the economics of the data that's going to help push NAMAD and Damon's platform. And every stage I get on, especially since like 2020 when we put this stuff together, I said, hey, the minority dealers are becoming one of the biggest best practices and success factors of the OEMs, because as this future majority gets closer to majority status, minority dealers are going to be they're going to be knocking on your door, Damon, going, hey, can you get us some more African American, Hispanic, and Asian Native American operators? Because we're trying to connect with this future, or in this case, the majority consumer. So I want to add that too.
It's interesting to me, though, that an OEM would ask you even that question, that all of a sudden, becomes the measuring stick to say, well, if we give you this dealership, how many, minorities or blacks or what have you, can you guarantee us? Do they ask that of white dealers to say, well, how many whites can you get us? So I understand where you're going with it. I guess there's some validity to it. But why are we putting this extra burden on minority dealers to get us more minorities? How about you go run a profitable dealership just like your white counterparts and let the chips fall where they may, right?
Because we continuously have to prove our worth.
Yep.
And we always continuously have to put the business case before someone, right? And so we as from a NAMAD perspective, and with our partnership with my brother Marc, we had to present the data, right? Yep. Data don't lie.
Yeah,
and
that's right. I think it's very good. It should be the cream on the case, or the icing on the cake, rather than the impetus as to why the OEM is going to grant you a dealership. It seems like an unrealistic extra burden that they're throwing on there to say, well, you got to guarantee us. Whoa! I got to guarantee you a well-run dealership and taking good care of all of our customers, regardless of their color. Because that's also to say that you're only going to get then dealerships that are appointed in black neighborhoods or Hispanic neighborhoods or Indian neighborhoods or what have you. So it's really one of those. I think it's problematic at its root to say that we're going to add this extra little feature to say as an OEM, okay, well make sure Marc, that you get us the numbers that we're looking for. And to me, it's just like, wow, the white dealer over there is laughing, going, I don't have any of those.
I want to add just one thing, though, to the credit of what Damon and his groups have done, pushing these OEMs into understanding.
Right.
Is that now we've come to realize that, Jim, no, you do not have to put a minority operator right in the centroid of, a black community, Hispanic community, Asian community to be successful. Similar to other cultures, again, I'll just throw out a couple: Italians and Russians and Germans that say, hey, you know what? We have and I'm using this example, we have a Russian family member, a Russian operator, 20 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
They will drive past 15, 20 dealerships to go support their own.
That's right.
And so I think now the OEMs are now recognizing that for this future majority communities, which include African Americans, that blacks will support other blacks when they have the opportunity. And
Right.
again, it starts at the ownership and equity level, which again, we push this all the time. People of color do not want jobs. They don't want training. They want ownership.
Right.
Only when they can't get ownership, then they look for leadership opportunities that could lead to an equity status so they can get ownership. And if they can't find those two, then they'll take a job that gets them the leadership that ultimately gets them the ownership. So
That's
I
right.
want to chime in at this juncture and say one of the best practices for success is just remembering a simple phrase I have. Any person, again, Jim, to your point, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male or female, when they walk into an entity, whether that be an OEM, whether that be a dealership, they first look up and want to see whose name is on the wall and who sits in the corner office.
That's right.
If they see somebody that has some kind of reflection or connection with them, then they feel like I'm at home.
That's right.
And so
Much the way we saw more females get into automotive when Mary Barra, and she's been there now for 8 years, sit in the, as the president of GM, doing a phenomenal job. Imagine that, a female running, General Motors.
That's
right. A shocker, right? That they could do such a great job. And, regardless of what side of the aisle that you're on, we have a vice president that happens to be, African-American. So, these are the major steps that we need to make in the country, and then realize it and say, look, let's make sure that the OEMs, it's funny, as a former dealer myself, OEMs would tack on all kinds of things to my invoices of every car. If they wanted more advertising in a certain area, add another $400 to the invoice that the dealer is going to pay. Well, you can imagine, and this idea actually came from a minority dealer that I recently spoke with. He said, why can't they throw on another $200 on every invoice for the diversity program? Okay. Now, if GM sells 1 million cars in the U.S. at $200 a clip, that's $200 million a year that they've got set aside in a fund that they can affect some major change with. If they match that 200 million and add their own 200, now you've got $400 million that they can divvy out and support minority dealers and black dealers with. So the money can be found. It's just a question of the willingness of the OEM to make this happen.
But I got to take it back some. I got to take it back even before we go that far in. So when like I said, I'm out here in Long Beach, California, Southern California. I think most people who are watching would agree that Southern California is a pretty diverse population.
Very.
And when I started selling cars at a big name dealership with big, deep pockets and 15, 18 stores in the group, I was the only black person at my store. So, I take that back. There was a customer service manager who also happened to be black. But as far as sales management, finance, there was no other black face. So as a person coming into the industry, how would I ever even feel that I can get on the sales desk or to a principal position, much less an ownership position for a diversity ownership program to even tap me on the shoulder if I walk in there and say, well, I'm one of one, maybe this isn't right for me. Right. So because that was my own personal experience, as I saw no leadership path. So why would I assume that there is one? You need to have some sort of representation. So it gets me into this conversation that I think is super important, is how do we attract and how do we retain and how do we develop this diverse talent as an industry? And before I offer this to the panel, I'd like to share something with you. So I went to a store that I used to work at that is run by my friend. He's a general manager. He's a person who happens to be of color, just not black though. And I'm asking him, I'm hanging out in his store. It's my old stomping grounds. And I said, hey man, you ain't got no black folks here. And my friend says to me, he's like, oh, we had a black guy and it didn't work. And he goes, on top of that, he's like, matter of fact, we had two and it didn't work. This guy was this and this guy was this, right? Now, this is my friend, okay? He's literally my friend. But what he said was, it gets back to that exceptionalism, but the wrong kind, where you're not allowed to be average. And to Jim, to your question was, how would an OEM say, hey, how many black folks are you going to give me when, they're not maybe necessarily asking white dealers that, how many, white folks are you going to get me? It's that separation of difference. Black people are different. Women are different. People who are 7 feet tall are different. People who are disabled are different. And because there's so few people, you're looked at with that exceptional eye. When my buddy told me we had a black guy and it didn't work, I almost fell over. So with that in mind, we have a serious concern in front of us. How do we really attract enough people of color into this industry so that we're not one of one? And now that I'm off my soapbox, I submit to the panel.
Well, let me say for Damon, a big part of it is become a member of NAMAD, National Association of Minority Automobile Dealers, or NAMAD Next Generation, because when you come to the annual conference, you will see OEM representatives, you will see dealers, you will see service managers, you will see general managers. And that is very important, Matt, to see what you can be, right? And I think also we have to remember that when it comes to promotion in terms of attracting people into the industry, I always thought that one of the most phenomenal campaigns was the seatbelt campaign. I know I'm dating myself, but when I was young in elementary school, they would teach us, hey, everybody needs to wear a seatbelt, because people didn't wear seatbelts back then. You wouldn't dare get into a car today without putting your seatbelt on. We need to have a consistent message out there about diversity, equity, inclusion at every level of automotive, particularly at dealership, but at the dealership level. But I think that one of the things we have to be very honest and transparent about is that many times at the dealership level, we are making our friends the manager. We are not transparent in our interview process, and we're not on a golf course with the dealer to get those positions. And so we need a more transparent internal process for hiring in this industry, in my personal opinion.
I'd like to add on to what Perry's saying. One is recognizing your bias and understanding that it's okay to have one, right? I'm talking to my used car manager. I'm working at an Audi store, and we're looking at these trades, and he's like, oh, that trade's not going to be a good fit. I'd never keep that on the lot, right? It's not that it's a good car, but we're an Audi dealership, and we're only going to keep a certain type of car, right? You look at fast forward, that was 2 years ago. We're keeping everything, right? There's no such thing as not a good fit. We're looking at it through a different lens. That same vehicle that you would have sent to auction, that same vehicle that you would have called a second buyer and been like, hey, let me get a bid on this car. You're now looking at it through a different lens. You're willing to take it through the shop, get it cleaned up, put it out on the point. So you got import dealerships who are holding on to domestic dealerships that are holding on to luxury. You're having buy here, pay here that are buying near new. You're having franchise dealers that are holding cars that are under $10,000. This is not inventory that we would have normally kept, right? But what are we doing? We're looking at it through a different eye. We're getting rid of our biases that say, oh, my brand is the best brand and no other car can be a competition to me. You can't use that thinking anymore because it's not profitable, right? You have to look at inventory differently and say, how can I retail as many pieces as I can? Well, when you look at hiring, wouldn't it be the same thing? If you're attracting people to your dealership because you have a diverse set of vehicles that they would have never come to your dealership before, they would have never stepped in because they said, I would never buy an Audi because that's not my brand. But now you have a Chevy and it's a $10,000 car, and I'm willing to bring my family to this dealership and do business with you because you have inventory that fits my needs. Well, wouldn't it be the same thing with your employees? If you have a diverse group of employees that in their inner circles, where they go to church, their friends and families, aren't they going to attract a diverse group of buyers? Well, of course they are. So it's the same principle, but it's the hiring that the bias that says you wouldn't be a good fit with our organization, or to the conversation earlier, they were there, but to Matt's point, they didn't fit, right? If you had an employee who was in a wheelchair and it didn't work out, would you say, employees in wheelchairs just not a good fit? Or would you make sure the climate is conducive to making sure that they thrive? Do you have a ramp? Is there an elevator? Have you made the bathrooms wide enough, right? Because you see them different. They are different. You have to appreciate that difference and put them in a climate where they can win. And that's the same thing for us. As women who work in this industry, I want to be in a climate that I can win, right? Before I got in the industry, I was a daycare teacher. I didn't have the resume of something that someone would hire me, but someone knew that I was passionate, I was bold, I was hungry, and they said, I'm willing to give you a chance. And we have to continue to make sure that those chances are out there for others who want to have an opportunity to come into our industry.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
I'm with it 100%.
Hey,
That was
100%.
Damon, if Tiffany does not have her own store in the next 2 years, there's something really wrong. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
what we
working
need,
on it, Tim.
right?
She has some homework to do for me, but the door is open. I don't want to say, her dealer principal is probably watching this, so we don't want Tiffany to walk to the door.
That's right. It's funny. But that's the passion that we need and to see more of. And the best part is that it's coming from a female who happens to be Black. And I was going to ask you, Tiffany, and I hate to, it's probably the host part of me coming out, but talk to us a little bit about what drove you to get into an industry that not only is predominantly white, but it's also 98% male. And here you come along and say, this is the industry I want to be in.
Well, I started out working in a buy here, pay here, and it was a minority dealer. It was a Persian group, of family brothers, 4 brothers. And I walked into the dealership and I had a bad experience buying cars. And I thought that I was going to handle their marketing. I'm 20 years old. I walk in, I want to handle marketing. He's like, get out of my face. Either you sell cars or walk out of here. And that moment was like, well, why not? And so from then on, I jumped into the industry. I was the only woman. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't like cars. But what I knew is that I couldn't feed my family on $7 an hour anymore. Yeah. What I knew is that I was peaked at the daycare teacher making $7 an hour. And it was never going to go any further. And I would never be able to have that next step. Right. So to look at my career now and how I started, and to know that I have to continue to make sure that other women like me get a chance, that other people have to see themselves and say, I didn't have the background. I had my GED. I didn't even, graduate high school, right? But those aren't the things that matter. At the end of the day, no one asks the general manager, dealer principal about his degree, right? How well can you run a store? What do your fixed operations look like? How are you coaching and training people? And as we continue to evolve into more transactional with digital retailing, it's going to be about the leadership, right? It's going to be about the people behind the scenes that make these things run, because you're going to be able to duplicate the process across the board. All the processes are going to look the same. So you got to invest in your people. People are the new currency. I say it all the time. And so if we're going to change the dynamic, we have to change the people.
Amen.
Great.
Amen.
My thought I want to add behind that, Erikka, Tiffany Wells, that is incredible. It's hard to even follow that. But what I will just say is that when you think about the topic of diversity, right, and you think about ethnic and gender, women and LGBT and military, et cetera, there's 2 roles that these influencers, people that live it and know it organically play. We always focus on what we should do, and that's important, what you should do. But I think equally important for the dealers and OEMs is having people of color, people of different gender, or females or women at the table, so they can tell you what not to do. And that's the one that's the big one. And in my business, we spend a lot of time on that. So I'll just give you one high-level example. We're talking about Black. One of the biggest misnomers or false paradigms in the Black community is that, hey, they're still breakdancing and moonwalking. And unfortunately, I'm saying it, everybody's laughing in the call. But when you look at, every 50th commercial for Black folks, somebody's trying to put them in there water waving. And who is giving you this intelligence that thinks that these young Blacks that are really out here grooving are still moonwalking and electric boogaloo? That is to add some humor to the conversation, Matt. But you got to, what I was going to add in its simplicity, just say that different needs to be embraced because it's good, because different makes you better, right? When you have different opinions, as they say, a salad with just all lettuce is no good, man. You got to have different toppings in the salad, and it mix them in, which is the inclusion piece. Bring them to the table so they can get to dealer owners like Damon and say, hey, Damon, from a female's perspective, here's what we should or should not do.
Right.
From a person of color perspective, again, Black, here's what we should or should not do. Hispanics may tell you, hey, Damon, what we should probably start doing is teach everybody when a Hispanic family comes in, don't just look to the male of the family, embrace the whole family. Hey, family, so we're out car shopping today. What would you all like? Because you may find it might be that younger son or the baby daughter, the most influence in the whole group. And so in Asians, you got to talk to them as a family, because you don't know if it's the male lead, if it's the female, who's buying. And then back to women, one of the things I learned at WIA, one of your women in automotive, is one, do not address a group of women. When it's just women, Tiffany and her friends come in, don't say, hey, guys, what are you looking to do? It's small things like that. Or the example like that I had was they said two women owned a landscaping business together. Two women, partners, came in and said, we want to buy a pickup truck. And the one, again, Caucasian male said, oh, so who's the lucky guy? They were like, strike one in their mind, strike one. There is no lucky guy. We're looking for, okay, so what color does he want? There is no he in this equation. And by the time they got to the third strike, they left that dealership and left that brand, went to another dealership that represented a different brand, and they got treated like two women that want to buy a pickup truck to serve their business. So I want to add that behind the cool things that you all said, that different is better. We need to embrace different and include some difference, because difference is going to help you win for all people.
And so from access matters and opportunity matters, right? And those two are two formulas to get in.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is there's this fear that when you have access and opportunity from a person of color standpoint, that we're taking away something. We're taking somebody's job. We're taking an opportunity from one. We're taking a point from somebody. How dare you guys come in and give such and such a store? What about me?
That's right.
Right? It's not anything that we're taking. We can't take anything away. We're adding to it. Right? We're adding a diversity. We're growing the pot. We're growing diversity of thought, to access, personalities, experiences. All of those are the secret ingredients, to Marc's point, of the salad of this auto industry. And so there's this whole big myth over the past 2 years, and Jim, that we're taking something away, which is why you got those emails.
That's right.
Erikka, when we talked about with the women WOCAN, you're taking away something from people who don't look like you guys. And so, ladies, I'm saying you got me, Marc. You got me.
We all here.
But so those are the things that happen because there's this fear, there's this underlying fear that there's something being taken away. There's opportunity, there's access, there's money, there's 100%. All of these things that are taken away from us.
That's right, 100%. There's no question about it. It's interesting too that, you know, I'm in a number of conversations when I was a dealer principal, and it was interesting how when we would talk about points that would come up or points that were awarded or what have you, and the OEM representative, this is going back 20 years, but they'd say, oh yeah, a black dealer got that point. Why did we mention that it was a black dealer that got the point, rather than just we already awarded that point, you know, to somebody, you know, oh, a black dealer got this or a black dealer sold that. Why are we doing that? Why is that relevant? Hopefully that's still not happening today, but I can assure you that it probably is at some level.
100% still happens. Yeah. It diminishes the brand. It diminishes the entrepreneur that got his store, and it makes it something less than what somebody already has.
That's right. I would also add something else into the conversation too, is that, you know, of the estimated 125, 130 dealers, Damon, to your point, that are actually out, the black dealers that are out there, I would challenge each one of those to have other dealers in training currently, because if not you, then who? So if you don't have a short list of dealer candidates yourself that can either A, take over your store so you can go buy another one, or B, that you can just say, look, we're training this person. I can make the introductions with the OEMs. I can make the introductions with Damon and his organization, and we can get you your own point. We also need to see that. We need to see, you know, everybody pulling together. It can't be, hey, I got mine, you go get yours some other way. Because think about it. If every one of the 130 black dealers had just one person that they said, this person is going to be a dealer one day, and I'm doing everything in my power to train them, promote them, maybe even finance them if the day comes and we can be partners in the deal together. But you could easily, over the course of the next 36 months, double this number. And so I would also, you know, say that there's an area that if you are a black dealer and you do not have that person, go find that person.
Yep.
Agreed.
Does that make sense?
That's the mentorship, man, and the networking. That's the epitome of it, Jim.
That's right. Because you can bust the meetings. You can do so much as a dealer principal currently to say, hey, I want you to meet, you know, Tom Jones over here, and this person's been in training, runs an incredible dealership. I'm totally behind him. I put my name to him or her, and let's find a dealership for them. And then it might make good business sense for you too as a dealer to throw some money, into the deal to say, look, this makes good financial sense.
So
So
can I?
I'm gonna keep it real, Matt. So I'm gonna say something that may get me in trouble. There's an opposite.
Oh wow! Somebody marked the date. You've never done that before.
There's this reverse fear too that when you do that, they're gonna leave.
Yeah. Well, and Damon, let me add on to that. I do think as an individual who wants to be a dealer, you also have to be proactive, right?
Mhm.
I love the story of, I don't know if you guys have heard the story of Sean Puffy Combs, but he actually rode the train 2 hours to go do a free internship at Andre Harrell's record label, excuse me, to just learn the business. So if you are a general sales manager and you know you want to be a dealer one day, go spend time in the service department. Make the time, make yourself so valuable, whether it's that dealer or another organization, that they will want to invest in you because of what you bring to the table.
Mhm.
I just think that we're at a point where it's like you have to understand that in this industry, dealers that have made it, that are successful, they want to see you're hungry. I mean, at the end of the day, they want to make sure that if they're going to invest in you, that you are going to put forth the effort to go all the way to the finish line, because it's a very difficult road to navigate.
And it's a long road to navigate for those. I mean, if now Jim's bringing our average up, but I think most of us here said that we've been in the business for something like in the 20 years. Jim brings us all to 25.
I thought you brought me on not because I'm the old guy, because I'm the white guy.
but when we think about it, we're all career automotive, and so we're talking about long-term success. And what I think is what's very interesting is we have people who, and all of you will attest to this, the rate of attrition in automotive is probably the highest of any major industry. Maybe there is something higher and I just don't know what it is, right?
Mhm.
But we're talking about 60%, 70%, 80% turnover. There's a lot of different reasons. You can go on LinkedIn and find 50 different reasons why people quit jobs, but it also comes down to one of those reasons have to be that pathway for success. So one of the questions I'd like to submit to the panel is, what advice, and this is going to be a two-part question, okay? Thinking about the person who just walks into the dealership, black, white, purple, green, male, female, whatever. The person who just walks into the dealership, what advice would you have for them starting off? And then the second piece to that question is, what advice do you have for somebody who might have been in the industry for a little while, who just feels stuck for whatever the reason being? And I'm going to open this up to the panel, but I think I would like to start with, if I could, Perry, I think this question is up your alley. So I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I would just go back to, what I was sharing. You have to really be relentless with your time. Whether you are in sales or service, read about service absorption. If you're in sales, read about tie down questions and what that means to your sales process and how you extract information from customers. Be the person that goes out and reads about the Middle Eastern community, and understand how to navigate through the nuances of that community when those consumers come in. It's all about, really, nowadays you have information all over the place. Join these, the free webinars. You should be the leader at your store on electric vehicle education. You should know more than any other person in that building. And when you get to that point, you will see the opportunities start to come to play. And if they don't, you go find them.
Mm.
So, the other thing that I would say too is that I think that organizations like NAMAD, right, National Association of Minority Automobile Dealers, uh, it's worth investing in yourself to go to the conferences and to participate, because the speakers, the people,
Yep.
these are people that you would not normally have access to, and they're sharing information with you that you're not going to get at the dealership level. It's very important. So I would just say be relentless with your time and be very, very relentless about self-development and growth.
So my thought behind it is, I'm going to take the first part of your question, Matt, and I'm gonna build on what Perry said. So let's talk about just getting in, and I'm gonna actually build on what Jim was talking about, mentorship, etc. I use the term, the big E, right? 2 E's: exposure and endorsement, right? But how do you gain either? I'm gonna use a little acronym, POV. You got to have a point of view, my friend, and to get that goes back to what Perry was saying. Read up, open your 2 ears, close your 1 mouth, and listen to identify what a potential problem is, right? So I'll just use my brother here, Damon. Damon's got a store that's running great in Bowie, Maryland. But Damon also, I'm sure, and I'm speaking on him, he's like on the call, he's always looking for what's that next opportunity. So I can tell you right now, just knowing my brother and just knowing the industry, him, Perry Watson III, your dad, anybody, right? They're saying, hey, whoever can walk in, male or female, and share with me a new opportunity, some new frontier. It doesn't have to be new. It could just be building a new mousetrap, slightly turning some things. So I'll go back on something that Tiffany mentioned, Tiffany mentioned, that I'm big on. I walked into a dealership one time, had this data in my pocket that says, what are the top 10 selling vehicles in this dealer's area of responsibility, right? Which should be your used car or your auction Bible, right? Instead, I walked on this lot, and to your point, Erikka, they had all these shiny, what I call shiny wheel syndrome out here. My data said in this area, which I protected, said the top 3 vehicles were Toyota Corollas, Honda Accords, and Honda Civics. Right? They didn't have a single Corolla, Accord, or Civic in the lot in there. Instead, when I walked up, all their used cars, which we all know are the lost leaders to get people on your lot, they have Mercedes and Lexus and BMW. So I asked this dealer, hey, man, the data I showed said you should have this out here to lure people in. And you got this. Who's buying your cars from auction? Oh, my son. So when we found out the son had the dad's checkbook, he's going to auction buying all the cars he wants. Had no connection to the consumer, right? And so what I did is, when I'm giving an example, a tactical example, is explain to the father, hey, why don't you license some data once a month, once a quarter that says, what are the top selling vehicles in my market? Give that to your son and tell him, this is your Bible. When you go to auction, buy these cars, the top 5, buy those when they show up. If top 5, then look at items 6 through 10. But that's what you buy, because that's what the people in the surrounding community that we serve want. And he was like, he came to the front chair. Man, that's the best idea ever. It was simplistic in my mind, because I deal with data all the time. But my point is, to any new person, Matt, find the niche that's going to get, again, I'm using Damon, he's the operator on this call, that's going to get Damon to say, whoa, that sounds like something that can increase my bottom line. Let me work with you. And then that will get Damon to put his arm around you and provide you some endorsement, and also allow you some exposure, which could lead to, Perry, your point, or Jim, your point, you get a new deal. And I think that's the net is you got to do the research and put in the time. But while you're doing it, don't try to repeat everything that's there. Try to find that new opportunity that's going to stretch, that's going to separate you from the pack.
Absolutely.
I think that's fantastic. I love it. Oh, I'm sorry. Erikka, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say 2 things. One is to you guys' point, what Marc said, Clubhouse was one of the first times that I was able to have conversations in rooms that I would have never been invited in, with owners, dealer principals, general managers. When I was just a little small speck on Clubhouse, they didn't know what my background was. So if I had something to add to the conversation, if I had something to add, then I didn't feel intimidated, one, because then I wasn't in a room where everyone didn't look like me, and I felt like my answer wasn't going to be relevant, right? My voice was brought up. I was brought up on stage. People clapped, and then I was invited to other conversations. I'd like to recognize Jim as well. He not only brought me on, brought WOCAN on, and this wasn't during Black History Month, and it wasn't during Women's Month. He just brought us on because, hey, Erikka, you have something to say, and it's not just about your struggle or what you've been through, but what attributes and contributions can you talk about in automotive? Because I'm an expert in this industry. I've been in this business 20 years. So I have expertise that is not just relevant to being Black and being a woman, but also just to being exposed to this industry. So I'd like to speak on that because I'm an expert. And you should see me as an expert just as you see anybody else, right? So I wanted to talk about Clubhouse, but also one of the things that kept me through was the difference between discrimination and competition. because there was a lot of times when I was going in the industry thinking that it was discrimination, when it was also, I'm in a very competitive industry, right? Every sales guy wants to beat me. Every sales girl wants to beat me. Every department, the guy next door. So they're going to be doing dirty things that have not necessarily something to do with me being a woman or being black, but because they don't want me to win, because every deal that I take from him. But if I look at it from a discriminatory point of view, that's something I can't control. I wake up every day, I'm going to be a black woman, right? I'm proud of that. That's who I am. But if I look at it from competition, then guess what? I'm going to continue to read. I'm going to do more sales books. I'm going to go to finance school, pay for it myself. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that my competitive advantage is above and beyond the things that I can control, so that you and I are going to see eye to eye, and we're going to fight tooth and nail, because I know now that my confidence comes from the experiences that I've had and what I can bring to the table.
Absolutely love it. And that competition, that fire, that's what brings a lot of people into automotive, I think. I think what's really exciting about automotive is that, at least in the experiences that I had, is that for the most part, everybody gets the same pay plan. We're all getting deal with the same pack. We're all going to get paid the same commission. And so if you get out there and you hustle and muscle, on the front floor, that opportunity is there. And I think that's very, very exciting. But Damon, I wanted to lean over to you. Did you have something you wanted to jump to contribute?
Oh no, Erikka dropped the mic, so I'm good.
I will say this though, Matt, as you get higher up off of the sales floor, that gap shrinkens, right? Because I've been in the business 20 years now, and I have yet to have a GSM opportunity. And I feel that when I was in Atlanta, the owners would give me anything, like more pay and more benefits, but what they refused to give me was a title to move up, because they were afraid of what it would trickle down to for people to say, I don't want to work for her. I don't want her to be my manager, when it's all white men on the sales floor and the sales manager, the general sales manager is a black woman. The fear is she a good representation, and what kind of kickback and what kind of flack am I going to get from this? And I am too fearful. So how about I just make you happy here? I'll pay you what you want. I'll give you want to leave early? What do you need to keep you quiet? When I'm telling you, no, my goal is higher than that, which is why I left Atlanta, which is why I'm here in Southern Illinois now, for an opportunity where I can continue to grow, and the dealer and my goals align, because she's very well aware of what I'd like to do next.
And didn't this person come after you?
Absolutely. I was recruited. Absolutely. But again, back to that exposure, because if it wasn't for Damon, it wasn't for Jim, and it wasn't for these places that allowed my voice to shine, I would have never found these opportunities. Even right in Atlanta, I went to NAMAD convention, and my dealer I worked for, who I wanted to be a general manager and told him, hey, that I'd like to go to dealer school, was at NAMAD and didn't even know that I worked for him. He's like, you worked at my store? I said, well, I worked at your store. I don't work there anymore because I left 3 months ago. So even within our own communities, we can be disillusioned from the very people who work for us and have no idea who your salespeople are. Shame on you. The talent's right there, but you're not giving them an opportunity, a chance, because of even our own biases, even within our own community.
Now you said
and
something.
that was, Matt, real quick, that right there. And Erikka, I did that introduction to Erikka and the dealer principal, and he had to walk away.
Yep.
He didn't know.
That's such a shame, especially in Atlanta.
And I said, you got a blue chipper, and you guys dropped the ball because you weren't paying attention.
Especially, and I'm in Atlanta, when you've got somebody, as smart as Erikka in Atlanta, okay, Atlanta, all right, leaving Atlanta for a better opportunity elsewhere, in the black community. You're scratching your head right now. Martin Luther King is spinning, going, whoa, how did that happen in my hometown, right? So, but it's actually a reality. There's no question about it. I just wanted to get back, and I know we're under the gun in terms of time, but you had asked what's the advice that you would give to those coming in, and that would be, first of all, become a student of the business. Really understand, and I think a number of you guys touched on this already, but really become a student of what's happening in the industry. The other one is be willing to work harder and smarter than anyone else on the showroom floor, and continue that approach. The other one would be, number 3 would be to get on the radar of the diversity program directors of the OEMs you're working with, okay? Immediately. It's never too soon. to say, look, here's my career path. And along with your help and maybe the dealer I'm working for, that's where I want to go. Because those program directors that I'm speaking to at the OEM levels, they're looking for candidates. Are they not, Damon? They're like, who else can we get that's currently in the industry that we can say, not today, they're going to become a dealer, but maybe 3 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, and they want to work with those individuals immediately. So those would be my three bit of advice. And of course, never give up. We give up in this industry way too easy. You know, you see great people that leave after 90 days scratching your head going, what happened? Typically, they just gave up for whatever reason. They might be valid. Don't give up. Keep going. So that's my words of wisdom for somebody coming into the industry.
Good stuff.
Excellent.
Guys, I'm going to wrap with one last question because, you know, today, Jim's point, want to be cognizant of time, and I appreciate the time that you spent with me right now. In your opinion, what is the importance of allies and mentorship in this industry?
Huge.
And that's the question that I want to leave us on, because I'm going to go ahead and say it. Everybody on this call is black or black adjacent. We know what our environment is. But for the folks who are watching who want to be allies, the folks who are watching who want to be mentors, maybe they don't know the impact that they can have. So I don't want to have it come from me. I'd like to hear it from the panel here. So again, I'm going to ask the question, in your opinion, what is the importance of allies and mentorship? And I'd like to start this question off, if I may, with Jim.
Well, clearly I'm an ally, you know, and hopefully a mentor to those in the industry, but it's so vitally important, Dealers, I think, take that lightly. General managers take it lightly. And I know they've got a very busy day, but there's no question about it that we need more allies. I will tell you another great resource for great allies, and that's the vendors in the industry. They can make a huge impact. They've got a ton of money right now because the industry's on fire, as you know, selling every car we can. And there's a tremendous amount of money out there, and there's a tremendous amount of influence out there. For those people that are listening, those sponsors of not just CBT, but the industry, those people that take from the industry, that make their livelihoods from the industry, that work with dealers and make a tremendous amount of money from dealers. It's time to give back and help in this particular area. We're not looking for billions of dollars. We're not even looking for millions of dollars. But you can imagine if you've got a tremendous amount of vendors coming together saying, look, let's all get behind this. Let's really shake this cage, and let's make sure that everybody knows and ring the bell. Everybody knows that we need more diversity in retail automotive. We can move mountains in this industry. We've done it before. We can do it again. Look at what we just went through with COVID. Look at what we went through in 2008, 2009. When dealers come together behind a cause, there's no stopping us. And it's time now that we get behind this cause. So to build allies and mentors out there, I can't say enough. It's a whole nother show, actually.
Yeah. Well, I want to say one thing that Jim said for dealers in particular. Just keep in mind that the folks that you mentor, you are the one that says to them, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's either the light of day or it's a train, right? And so it's very important, because I think sometimes what happens is, especially if you walk into an organization and you don't see yourself, and maybe you're the first one that's walking down that path, having mentors is essential. And I think that you mentioned vendors. One of the things that I can tell you that's been, great about being on the vendor side is really there is a sincere longing to be a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I can speak on that at Solera, which is part of the reason they've given me the opportunity to be a part of conversations like this. And so I think you're on to something, Jim. I think there's a lot of great that can come from partnerships within the vendors as well.
That's right. They want to help.
Mark?
Yeah, I'll jump in and I was sitting there thinking and listening. I mentor a lot of young people, but I want to expand out to say it's the same principles apply. And what we look at is we try to teach the unspoken rules of corporate America. So now you're thinking about all the dealers and the GMs, and you walk into a room like, let's say, Neyman, and there's 400 people anytime Damon clicks a crowd everywhere he goes. There'll be 400 people in that room. But if you have and I'll drop some names. If you have the Winston Pittmans of the world, and the Sandys, and the Perry Watson the thirds, and the Jim Collins around you, and they befriend you or take you in like family, they can help you navigate that room like a surgeon. I mean, pretty much to say, hey, there's 500 people here, but Mark, there's 3 people you need to go talk to. And what I love about those, and I called out 3 gentlemen, Erikka, but there's females in this group as well, Janelle Rosses and stuff of the world, that can say, hey, let me take you right over, move right past the crowd, almost like open the seat and say, hey, here's somebody I think you two need to meet. Yep. And cut down your path, your pathway to whatever you're trying to do significantly. You know, instead of 6 months working through, it could be 6 minutes. And now you're right there. And the second thing I'm gonna add, and I'll be done, is one of the coolest things I've ever been involved with, which included quite a few of those people, Maurice Williams for General Motors, and Damon put this together and brought a bunch of us executives together from Automotive, is we did a black college tour a couple years in a row. And I thought it was one of the coolest things I've been involved with in my career, where it was called Careers in Automotive. And our goal was singular, is to expose these young black males and females to all of the potential outlets and inroads in automotive. That they were, when we walked in, these were like 2 or 3 hour long sessions. We spent half a day there. We walked in, they believed that being part of automotive meant one of 2 things. Either I built the car or I sold the car. And there was nothing in between. And both of them were jobs. It had nothing to do with ownership or nothing. Then here I walk in, I'm an entrepreneur in a multi-billion-dollar organization. I built a multi-million-dollar business by providing diversity data and becoming the expert and service all the OEMs, et cetera. Then there's Mo Williams, who he doesn't own a dealership, but he puts a lot of people into dealerships. And they walked away like, whoa. So I don't like selling, but I can do some data analytics. And it was really, really cool. So that piece too is, I want to add to the conversation to say, you may think you want to be a dealer, but actually you're a better, like Mark Bland replacement, et cetera, that you want to do something where you provide a key service or part or something, and you can still have a great life, very lucrative life, et cetera. And I think that's the other piece, is getting with these individuals and learning who you are and where you fit. Yep. And they can help you do that.
Great.
That's perfect. I'll jump in. I'm going to add a word to it. So I would say ally, mentor, and advocate. Mm-hmm. You have to have an advocate that's on your starting 5. And it's nothing like someone that can call someone inside to give that word of approval or words of a recommendation, or just to hold someone's hand and walk, to Mark's point, walk them right up to say, hey, this is the person I was telling you about. That matters. That matters a lot. And I would say we do that a lot with NAMAD, and particularly at the conference, but also outside of it. But it matters to have that advocate, and being told no is very crushing. And to Jim, your point, we tend to tap out quick because we've been told no. And no should not be no as to take away your dream. It's just not the dream for you. And we need to be cognizant of that. And so those are my 3 points, Matt. Just advocate, ally, and mentor.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you. Erikka.
Allyship is so important that we have a division of WOCAN just for allies, because we do get so many people who come and say, how can I help? I'm not Black, I'm not a woman. So what is it? What kind of contributions can I bring to the table? Because it is an uncomfortable conversation, right? And we have to get out of our comfort zone. Sandy Zanino is the head of our ally program. She's absolutely amazing. She does a fantastic job. You know, we need people like her to bring it. We tell her that she's been invited to the cookout. So you know what that means, right? It's a private inside group. She knows what happens at the cookout. But guess what? It's bigger than that, because when she knows the inner functionings and how we talk and how our culture is and what's important to us and what's protecting to us and what's sensitive to us, and then she goes back and tells people about the cookout and how it was, now people who weren't invited want to know how to get in, right? Those are conversations that are being had that I can't have because I can't show you and tell you because we don't speak the same language. But Sandy's able to go back in and help us get more sponsors, help us get more allies, more people who say, I don't really understand, I don't feel comfortable. And it's not always our place to educate, but she can educate them from a place of knowing, because she says, let me tell you about my own privilege, right? And that privilege doesn't not necessarily mean you didn't have a hard life or didn't go through things. It just means that your skin color isn't one of them, right? That's all privilege means, is that your skin color didn't keep you from rising to the top. And she needs to be able to have those conversations on our behalf to continue to bring more people who can help us get the change. Because if it's a room of all Black women talking about how to fix not having all Black women in automotive, we won't be able to rise to the top, because the leaders don't look like us. We're not the ones that are the problem, right? We have to look outside of ourselves. Damon is an amazing mentor to me. I have him on speed dial when I'm having a question, when I have something going on, when I'm asking about ownership and leadership and who I need to be connected to. And when I'm at the NAMAD convention, he's saying, hey, sit at my table. You want to sit right here, and I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Watson, and make sure you're in connection with Fitzpatrick. And I'm going to introduce you to the name players and the who's who's. Those are those pieces to the puzzle that are going to pay dividends. And that's why I say it's people currency, because we want to always invest in things that are going to be lucrative later on. But the residual effects of people, those relationships pay you for eons, right? The relationships that I'm building right now are going to pay dividends 10, 15, 20 years from now, and not necessarily in this moment. I may not even realize how that conversation, that communication, that ad on LinkedIn or Facebook is going to be relevant to me in the future. So for us, we have to continue to make those connections, because they're going to build on them. And then it's like currency. It's like having stock in some stuff that you didn't even think about years ago, that later on you're going to sit back and enjoy and go, I am so glad that I made those connections years ago. And I'm so glad for the people like Damon who were there making sure it happened. And now how can I pay it back? And how can I pay it forward?
Perry, before we give the mic over to you, I want to give a big shout out to Sandy. I think we all need to give a big shout out to Sandy. World-class ally right there. Perry?
Just to put a bow on it, I think at the end of the day, we've all said it in an indirect way. It's going to take partnerships to move the ball forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think this is a sample of some of those partnerships. And I want to be a part of this movement, because I believe that all of the stars are aligned in terms of the importance, the economic benefit, the opportunity. And I just believe that, like you're doing right now, we have to continue to elevate the conversation and make sure that not only that we're aware, but that the people that are in the different portions of our business or automotive business are aware as well. But I think I can speak on behalf of everyone here. We are your allies in moving the ball forward. So, please follow up with us.
To the barbecue, whatever this barbecue
Jim, start again.
Jim's trying to get invited to the barbecue. He's already Jim, you're already invited.
I love barbecue.
Well, I am going to be, I do not want to monopolize everybody's time, because I know the people watching, they will stick around here all day if I don't shorten this up. The people on the call, you guys have lives to live and people to impact. So I say with the utmost respect and sincerity, thank you for what you have brought to myself, my company, and the people who have joined us over the last hour or so. I'm watching these comments. I don't know if you guys can see the comments, but I can. The people who are watching this are impacted. What you said today is important. It's powerful. These conversations are going to continue to grow, not just within TrueCar, but because of this conversation here, it's going to grow there. It's going to grow there. It's going to grow there. And that's the value of all this. So I say it again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If I can ever be any service to you, Perry, Jim, Erikka, Marc, Damon, hit me up. I'll put my lunch down. It seems like I'm always eating. But I'm there for you no matter what it is, and I'll take care of it, because that's how much I appreciate this. You guys have been fantastic. Does anybody want to just have a parting shot before I wrap this up?
I think you said it all. Did a great job, by the way. Great job, Matt. Thanks for having us.
Well, hearing that from Jim, that means a whole lot. Let me say that again.
No, I just said thank you to everybody on the panel. It's an honor to be with you today. And thank you, Matt. Appreciate you, man. Always.
Yep. My pleasure. And again, shout out to TrueCar. Thank you for giving us the space and encouraging this. This is going to be it. And this is not our last diversity conversation. Check us out next month. We are going to be tackling the women's experience in automotive. And I look forward to seeing you then. To the panelists here, a sincere thank you. And this has just been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Take
See
care.
ya.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.